Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Chapter 41, Using Both Hands. The metal door was completely opened by Lu Yu. After a few puffs of white smoke came out, the breaking ability was lost. If you are sick, you must treat it. It just so happens that my childhood dream was to be a doctor. Lu Yu grabbed Obadiah by the collar of his shirt and lifted Obadiah from the control room like a chicken. He brought it up. I can help you. How could you be okay? That was a bullet that inhibited your ability. Obadiah waved his arms in fear, making a last and feeble struggle. His body, which had been hollowed out by wine and sex all the time, had no capital to resist. Without the protection of the mecha, Obadiah might not even be able to defeat an ordinary person, let alone Lu Yu, who is extremely physically strong. Obadiah's fist hit Lu Yu, which caused less damage than a mosquito. At least the mosquito could make people itch. Ability suppressing bullets. Lu Yu frowned. He tried to use his Death God's Kingdom variant ability. As expected, it seemed as if he was isolated by something and couldn't use it. However, Lu Yu could also feel that the intensity of this isolation was slowly weakening over time, and would completely lose its effect after about 2 hours. This is great stuff. Lu Yu reached out with one hand to lift the struggling Obadiah in the air, and with the other hand, he followed half of his body into the operating room and picked up the silver-white gun that Obadiah had dropped on the ground. After looking at the magazine, there were still 7 bullets in it, and Lu Yu put the pistol into his arms. You destroyed my favorite sports car. I must help you. Lu Yu turned his head and sneered at Obadiah, grabbing Obadiah's clothes with both hands. He was thrown into the air like a football. No. Obadiah's body rolled up in the air, his voice was shrill, and his eyes were filled with extreme fear and terror. Lu Yu raised his head, aimed at the direction in which Obadiah was thrown, pushed his foot on the head of the iron robot, jumped towards Obadiah in the air, and chased after him. Boom, boom, boom. The iron robot lost control, and its body collapsed heavily on the ground, shattering the road on the ground and causing a burst of dust and smoke. You are so lucky. Rising to the same height as Obadiah, Lu Yu grinned at Obadiah. In Obadiah's eyes, that smile looked like a devil's smile. Among so many people, my car was chosen. You, what do you want to do? Obadiah's voice trembled uncontrollably, which sounded a little unclear to Lu Yu's ears. Lu Yu did not answer Obadiah's words. He clasped his hands together and raised them high above his head. After about a second of accumulating strength, he hit Obadiah hard with a fierce roar that broke through the air. On Yu's belly? Don't want. Under the bombardment of Lu Yu's huge amounts of power, Obadiah's body suddenly curled up, his eyes almost bulged out due to the severe pain, and the veins on his temples kept beating. Puff. Spurting out a mouthful of blood, his body stopped rising under the huge amounts of Lu Yu's power and fell rapidly towards the ground. All of this happened very quickly, and together it was just a blink of an eye. Friend, I think you did a great job. Tony controlled his steel battlesuit against the ground, and when Obadiah was about to touch the ground, he managed to catch Obadiah's body. The rest is how about leaving it to me. You can go home, take a shower, and have a good time with some girls. Since you have just left school, I can help you contact the beauties, and I guarantee that they are all big Hollywood stars. Stark, I don't think your proposal is very good. Lu Yu fell back to the ground, and the earth made a dull sound. He stared closely at Obadiah at Tony's feet, and said with a very firm tone, "This man's life can only be taken by me." The two people started an invisible confrontation at this moment. Tony, my good nephew, please look at the fact that I have worked hard for the Stark Group for so many years. Please save me from this devil. Obadiah could only lie on the ground because his leg had been broken. He hugged Tony's calf, his face covered with tears, snot, and blood, and he kept howling. Uncle Obadiah. Tony called out in confusion. Yeah, it's me. Tony, please save me. Obadiah seemed to be grasping the life-saving straw, nodding frantically, as if he saw hope in his eyes. Do you still remember what my father taught me when I was a kid? Tony raised his hand and punched Obadiah hard in the face, causing Obadiah's saliva to fly everywhere and causing a mess for himself. You have to clean it up yourself. Our major shareholder. Tony simply vented his anger, kicked Obadiah away, raised his hands and backed away slowly, saying, "You won, now he is yours." After weighing the pros and cons, Tony finally chose to compromise with Lu Shi on the issue of Obadiah. Not only because he felt that the energy of his armor was insufficient and it was impossible to beat Lu Yu, but also because he needed Lu Yu's support in the subsequent board meeting. Use a person who is destined to die. To sell Lu Yu a favor and ask Lu Yu to help him eliminate the remaining members of Obadiah's group. Although Tony cannot be said to be a qualified businessman, he is still happy to do this kind of absolutely profitable business. A wise choice. Lu Yu glanced at Tony appreciatively, making Tony feel a little uncomfortable. Being praised like this by someone much younger than himself made Tony's voice full of helplessness. Just be happy. Devil? You are a devil. Don't come here. Don't come here. When Obadiah saw Lu Yu walking towards him, he suddenly turned pale with fear and struggled to crawl away with his bloody hands, trying to do his best possible escape from Lu Yu. Devil. Lu Yu walked up and chuckled, grabbed Obadiah's head, and lifted Obadiah's head up. At this time, Obadiah had a pale face. Deadly, you think I'm that kind of inferior thing? Not at all. Death energy appeared in Lu Yu's palm, and Obadiah's skin began to quickly become pale and old, but in an instant he turned into a senile old man. Let me, sir. Obadiah's hoarse voice begged Lu Yu for mercy, but the aging of his body did not stop. His skin began to dry up, his blood vessels slowly shrank, and the beating of his heart in his chest became weaker and weaker. Lu Yu put his face next to Obadiah's ear, with a hint of joking in his voice. Do you know why I said your brain was filled with water? Because I am a being who will kneel down and tremble when the devil's master comes. You actually naively think that you are lucky to have messed with me. Chapter 42, JARVIS. What's going on? Tony was horrified by the strange and terrifying scene in front of him. A living middle-aged man in front of him turned into a weathered mummy in a few seconds. Obadiah's face had lost all moisture and was like cracked soil. There was no trace of the powerful business tycoon he once was. The current Obadiah is as hideous and terrifying as the mummies displayed in the museum. Sir, I can only detect that the water in Obadiah's body disappeared rapidly, and then he lost all vital signs. J.A.R.B.I.S.'s words made Tony look unhappy. What he disliked most was things that science could not explain, which would make him lose control of the situation. He is a scientist, not a mystic. It seems that I have to take some time out to pay attention to mutant. Tony muttered to himself, and then very carefully ordered JARVIS, help me make arrangements, I will get the first prize tonight. Publish the information on Mutant X gene. Do you want to do it again? After kicking Obadiah's mummy to pieces, Lu Yu suddenly shook his left hand at Tony a few times, and his brows raised. Lu Yu's extraordinary abnormal hearing allowed Lu Yu to hear Tony's whisper to himself. Are you kidding? I still have a lot of good times that I haven't enjoyed yet. Tony waved his hand quickly and controlled the armor from shaking his head. I don't want to look like that. Then don't let me know that you are using mutant for research. Lu Yu said to Tony with a warning tone, otherwise I will do something to you that you don't like. Although Lu Yu does not often use his mutant ability, his identity as a mutant is an indisputable fact. As he grows older, Lu Yu knows more and more things. In his heart, he was filled with incomparable disgust and hatred for the discrimination against mutants and the various inhumane research experiments. The act of torturing Obadiah until he died without even sparing his body also contained Lu Yu's anger at being called a mutt by Obadiah. Absolutely not. I am a serious person. You should know that we at Stark Industries have always only done serious business. Tony subconsciously took a step back, nodded and said in a rather affirmative tone, that kind of thing you said, it's absolutely true, only those scumbags like Osborne like So Wong. Maybe you should talk to them. They don't even spare cute lizards, cockroaches, and snakes, let alone people. Stark, I am also one of Osborne's shareholders. Lu Yu reminded him somewhat amusingly. He did not expect that at this time, Tony would not forget to attack his group's opponents. The U.S. market is just that big, as both the top companies in the U.S., Stark Industries, and Osborne Industries have extremely fierce collisions and competitions in many fields. It might be a bit far from being called a rival, but it's not that far off. This can be seen from Tony's attitude towards Osborne. Okay, pretend I didn't say it. Tony was stunned for a moment, then suddenly changed the subject and asked, I briefly looked at your information, and your history of success is simply a legend. Do you have any tips you can teach me? Stark, you don't need to be so nervous about complimenting me? It's not like your character. Lu Yu did not answer Tony, but as he spoke, he tore off his clothes that had been shredded into fabric, revealing his muscular body underneath. But not exaggerated muscles. We are not enemies. Lu Yu extended his hand to Tony, making Tony think that Lu Yu wanted to shake his hand. Just when Tony was about to shake Lu Yu's hand to express his goodwill, he suddenly heard Lu Yu's next words. He maintained a posture with one hand not fully extended, and his whole body was frozen in place. After you take off your clothes and lend them to me. Lu Yu's tone was serious, not like he was joking. Maybe we will become friends. J.A.R.V.I.S. Have I been robbed? Tony asked his smart butler J.A.R.V.I.S. in disbelief. Have I been robbed by 10 bosses who are richer than me? Sir, judging from the current situation, it is like this. J.A.R.V.I.S.'s gentle voice sounded. My suggestion is that you'd better give your clothes to the other party to avoid conflicts that are not beneficial to you. What you mean is that this guy is richer than me, and I can't beat him. Tony pressed the button, and the steel armor began to disintegrate from his body, starting from the parts of his palm, piece by piece, falling to the ground. Why do you have to say it so tactfully? Sir, I can't belittle you like that. This is the program you set for me. Pieces of red and gold parts were scattered and rolling on the ground. After his body lost the protection of the steel armor, the sense of security in Tony's heart as Iron Man suddenly disappeared without a trace. After taking off the steel armor, he is just an ordinary person. At most, he is an ordinary person with a smarter mind. A bullet can kill him. Tony stood there hesitating for a while, and finally chose to walk up to Lu Yu, stared into Lu Yu's eyes and asked helplessly, Are you sure you want to do this? Don't have any other better ideas? I have no other ideas. Lu Yu nodded with certainty, then raised his outstretched hand a little higher. As long as the clothes are on. Okay, clothes, right. Tony's face turned bitter, and he 847 said while taking off his clothes, let an almost 40-year-old man enjoy the cold wind shirtless on a winter night. That's none of my business. You can't afford the hospital. Do you need me to buy you a hospital? Lu Yu's face was full of smiles. He just wanted to deliberately prank this Iron Man. He often watched. I wasn't used to the proud aura on Tony's body, because Lu Yu himself is also a very proud person. Thank you. After taking Tony's clothes and putting them on himself, Lu Yu patted Tony's shoulder and walked towards the dark corner in the distance. He heard the sound of sirens, and those useless American policemen arrived slowly after the incident was over. You're welcome, you forced me to do this. Tony shrugged helplessly. The cold air in the air made him feel like he was in the North Pole. After walking a certain distance, Lu Yu suddenly stopped. He turned back to Tony and said teasingly, You're not going to make 10 anti-prince armors as soon as you get home, are you? That's a good suggestion. Although I didn't have this plan just now, I have it now. Tony hugged his shoulders and shivered in the parts of his steel armor. I'll wait and see. Lu Yu's body suddenly collapsed when he walked into the dark corner, turning into black sand all over the sky and disappearing into the night. Chapter 43. After leaving the highway, it was already 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Lu Yu did not choose to go to her parents' house to disturb her parents' rest, but lived in a nearby villa under her own name. After taking a bath in the shower room, Lu Yu fell on the bed with relief. Too many things happened today, which made him feel extremely tired. From fighting against Magneto during the day, gaining the recognition of godhood at the critical moment, he counter-killed Magneto. Then he went to the bar to drink and relax at night, and conquered Deadpool who came to kidnap him. Finally, on the way back to visit my parents, I met Iron Man. The speed at which these things unfolded was like a movie with a tight plot, which made Lu Yu feel mentally exhausted. 657 wished he could lie down and fall asleep immediately. Fortunately, he was a little tired this day, but from everything that happened, Lu Yu gained unexpected benefits. Especially in an alternative way, I got to know Iron Man Tony, which made Tony have a deep impression on him, which will save him a lot of time in the future. In Lu Yu's conception, the main core figure in the establishment of a cutting-edge laboratory was Zhao Helen. She is an expert at building Ultron's body, and she is very good at biogenetics. If such a doctor were in charge of deciphering the Mystique gene, the efficiency could be improved by at least several %. After all, Although Mystique is Lu Yu's enemy, Lu Yu does not intend to study her in a very cruel way. When the conditions are limited to drawing blood and extracting skin surface tissue, it is very important whether the person conducting the experiment is talented. Lu Yu personally hates using mutants to conduct inhumane experiments. If the end of mutants had not happened in the future, Lu Yu would not even want to conduct research on the X gene. But although Lu Yu likes S.H.I.E.L.D, if he wants to get S.H.I.E.L.D to work for him, Lu Yu can't succeed just by going up with money and throwing wads of money at her. Top talents like S.H.I.E.L.D are different from ordinary experts and professors. Without a strong relationship, it is difficult for you to invite her to participate in an inexplicable research. Tony Stark and Helen Zhao are very good friends. In Lu Yu's plan, he originally wanted to contact Helen Zhao through Tony. Although Lu Yu is the majority shareholder of Stark Industries, he has always been conducting investments remotely and has never even met Tony. Before today, Lu Yu had been thinking about how to contact Tony without arousing hostility and get Tony to agree to be his informant. Obadiah's incident just gave Lu Yu such an opportunity. Thinking of Tony's naked body shaking, Lu Yu felt funny in his heart. Thinking about the future, Lu Yu slowly fell into sleep. Noon the next day. There are no annoying alarm clocks running around the house, and there are no annoying criticisms from Diane Luo Looping Shop. After a long sleep, Lu Yu was in good spirits and in a good mood. Wearing a nightgown and slippers, Lu Yu took out a plate of fresh steak from the freezer in the storage room, hummed a tune and walked to the kitchen. That's right, it's the song How Lonely is Invincible. This is Lu Yu's favorite song. Lu Yu owns more than 100 properties across the country, including more than 10 independent villas in New York alone. Every 3 days in these villas, specially hired servants will come to clean them and replace the spare ingredients in the villas so that they can be used at any time when Lu Yu comes to live. Although this was a bit extravagant and wasteful, Lu Yu didn't care much about this issue. This is his concept of life. Everything is based on high-quality enjoyment. If money is not used, its existence will be meaningless. On the road outside Lu Yu's villa, there is a white off-road vehicle parked under a poplar tree. This off-road vehicle has a very ordinary license plate and looks unremarkable. Its opaque glass windows also make people uncomfortable. Find a way to see the scene clearly. The target lives here. A woman with a hot figure and a good face wearing a one-piece black leather jacket in the passenger seat said in surprise to the man in a black suit in the driver's seat next to her, "How can there be such a place in this area? Such a big villa looks like someone very wealthy." Today's master is not an ordinary rich man, Natasha Romanoff. The man in the black suit always had a calm smile on his face, as if nothing could make him move. The amount of money he earns in a day is estimated to be as much as to our 10 lifetime wages. Tisk, 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 the target seems to be less than 20 years old, right? He can actually own such a huge asset. If Lu Yu can definitely recognize this woman here, she is the Black Widow Natasha Romanoff who Lu Yu met when he was a child. Is it necessary to dispatch 2 high-level agents to conduct a risk assessment for a young rich man? If the boss hadn't had something to do and couldn't leave, he would have brought a whole team of people here in person. The situation is so serious. Natasha Romanoff was a little surprised when she heard the man in the black suit. He knew that the man in front of him would never exaggerate at work. This man is a member of some kind of terrorist organization and wants to use his own funds to cause a financial crisis. Something like that. It's not like you don't know that the country's economy is not under our control. The man in the black suit pursed his lips and said, "We only care about those who can pose a major threat to the life and safety of the country and people, like the one in the room." Natasha Romanoff was even more surprised. A boy less than 20 years old. It's this harmless 4.8 boy who just killed Magneto yesterday, leaving the entire bureau helpless. The man in the black suit adjusted his clothes and said to Natasha Romanoff in a joking tone, "I'm going to meet him now. He asked him for lunch, by the way. You are responsible for staying in the car to pick me up. If anything happens to me, please put a few bouquets of my favorite flowers in front of my tombstone." "I will." Natasha Romanoff nodded solemnly. She knew that in the agent business, the more dangerous the situation, the more likely they would make fun of their peers. They used this method to ease the tense atmosphere and conceal their inner uneasiness. "Wish me good luck." The man in the black suit opened the car door and walked out. I hope the lunch prepared by our boy is sumptuous enough. Chapter 44, Who are you looking for? Hearing someone knocking on the door, Lu Yu walked out of the kitchen and opened the door of the villa, looking at the man standing in front of the door with some confusion. This man was wearing a straight black suit, and standing there made him feel like he couldn't be ignored. Under the neatly styled hair, the smile on that face made people feel friendly involuntarily. Lu Yu frowned. The face of the man in the suit seemed familiar to him, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it. Lu Yu can guarantee that among all the people he knows, there is absolutely no one who can make a deep impression on people at first glance. Prince Kane, right? The man in a black suit took out an ID card from his pocket and handed it to Lu Yu, saying with a little pride, I am an agent from the Strategic Homeland Defense and Attack Support Bureau. You can call me Phil Carlson. Strategic Homeland Defense and Attack Support Agency. Lu Yu opened the ID of the man in black suit, Phil Carlson, and read the name on the ID. He immediately understood where his familiarity with Phil Carlson came from. As one of the actors who has appeared the most in the Marvel world, Lu Yu even watched Phil Carlson 03's face for 4 seasons in S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in his previous life. It's weird if you don't feel familiar with that face. I can't remember it at the moment, because it happened a long time ago, and Phil Carlson is not my favorite character, so I don't remember it very clearly. That's right. Phil Carlson nodded. Our responsibility is just like the name of the agency, responsible for the security of the entire country. This name is really confusing. Lu Yu stepped aside and motioned for Phil Carlson to come into the room and said, Don't you think about changing the name? I think S.H.I.E.L.D. would be good, and people can guess it at first glance. What do you do? And the most important thing is that the name is easy to remember. Phil Carlson walked into the house, looked at the layout of the house, and nodded in agreement. I also think the name S.H.I.E.L.D. is very good. I will propose it to my boss. Whether it succeeds or not is up to you. Believe me, you will definitely change it to this name. Lu Yu's tone was very sure, which made Phil Carlson a little surprised. This is something that even he, a senior agent in the bureau, is not sure about. I don't know where Lu Yu, an outsider, gets his confidence. Thank you. Although Phil Carlson was curious in his heart, he still had a polite smile on the surface. So, Agent Phil Carlson. Although Lu Yu had already guessed Phil Carlson's purpose, he still said knowingly, I am a law-abiding taxpayer. I have neither planned nor participated in any plan to fly a plane into a building. Terrorist attack, why do you want to find me? Lu Yu actually understands. Hydra has his files, so there is no reason why S.H.I.E.L.D., which is more concerned about national security, would not. The reason why S.H.I.E.L.D. chose to contact Lu Yu at this time is simply because although he had left a file in S.H.I.E.L.D. before, it had not yet reached a certain level of danger. It has to be said that it is not unreasonable for Hydra to completely penetrate into S.H.I.E.L.D. Just looking at the details of intelligence work, Hydra didn't know where to discover Lu Yu's special characteristics a long time ago, but S.H.I.E.L.D. only became aware of it after Lu Yu made several big moves in succession. Lu Yu's is different. Lu Yu estimates that in his previous S.H.I.E.L.D. files, he probably wrote comments about potential mutant kids. It won't be as high-end as the information in Hydra, and it won't even reach the level of attracting the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s senior executives. Do your best to eliminate all risk factors to the country and nip the danger in the cradle as soon as possible. This has been S.H.I.E.L.D's consistent style and routine over the years. If S.H.I.E.L.D had known more detailed information about Lu Yu, they would not have waited until so late to contact Lu Yu. And if Lu Yu was just an ordinary citizen, their attitude would not be as harmonious as it is now. For those ordinary super-ability people, S.H.I.E.L.D's policy is to either join us or be hunted by us. But behind Lu Yu is not only the backer of X Academy, but also a person with a very important social status, which makes S.H.I.E.L.D not dare to act rashly. To put it mildly, S.H.I.E.L.D is also an organization that bullies the weak and fears the strong. They couldn't use force to force him, so they sent agents to negotiate with Lu Yu. On the one hand, He wanted to give Lu Yu a warning, and on the other hand, he wanted to understand his character and weaknesses through conversation. It is convenient for them to formulate response measures regarding Lu Yu. I'm here to ask you about the sudden disappearance of Magneto, the leader of the terrorist organization Mutant Brotherhood. Phil Coulson seemed to have known Lu Yu's reaction, and said with an unchanging smile on his face, "The Bureau, everything has been turned upside down because of this incident. I think you can definitely tell me some specific details." I said I didn't know what would happen. A team of people rushed in from outside and arrested me. Lu Yu walked back to the kitchen with a nonchalant expression, turned the fire back on and continued to fry the steaks. "I'm making lunch. Do you want some?" "Thank you. It just so happened that I didn't even eat breakfast because I was in a hurry." Phil Coulson sat at the dining table. He didn't continue to ask, and the expression on his face didn't change. "I like medium rare." After a while, "Please taste it. This is a treat that ordinary people cannot enjoy." Lu Yu placed a plate of steak in front of Phil Coulson, supported the table with both hands and stared into Phil Coulson's eyes. "Can you tell me what you think of Mutant 720 humans with great power?" Phil Coulson gracefully cut off a small piece of beef and put it in his mouth, and that was it. "Good answer." Lu Yu nodded with great satisfaction. "I killed Magneto, and so did Obadiah of the Stark Group. Actually, Obadiah's matter was handled by me. Little Stark said he wanted the matter to end, so I didn't mention it." Phil Coulson was slightly stunned after hearing Lu Yu's words, with a very surprised expression. Said, "To be honest, this is the first time I feel that my job is so easy. I didn't expect you to admit it so readily. You want me to play Tai Chi with you," Lu Yu said in a teasing tone, "and then after you give the order, dozens of people rush in and point tranquilizer guns at me. Although I'm not afraid, it would also make people feel very irritated, wouldn't it?" Lu Yu approached Phil Coulson and said with deep meaning in his tone, "At present, we are getting along quite happily, so I don't want to think about it." The atmosphere between them became tense. "Magneto and Obadiah are just insignificant little characters. I want to talk to you about bigger, more important things. Believe me, I know more about you and S.H.I.E.L.D than you and your boss think." We haven't changed our name yet." Phil Coulson was taken aback by Lu Yu's aura, and his tone couldn't help but sound weak. Chapter 45, Don't worry about the title I use. Lu Yu sat across from Phil Coulson and said with a very firm tone, "It's only a matter of time. Anyway, since I came in, you have been repeatedly emphasizing that we will definitely change the name to S.H.I.E.L.D. Phil Coulson frowned. He couldn't think of any basis for Lu Yu to make such a conclusion. "What do you want to express?" "I am a mutant, you should know this." Lu Yu did not answer Phil Coulson directly. There was an imperceptible smile in his eyes. He planned to tell a big lie in front of the giant S.H.I.E.L.D. Seeing Phil Coulson nodding, Lu Yu continued, "Mutants have all kinds of strange abilities, but my ability is quite special." After a pause, Lu Yu said word by word in a deep voice, "My eyes allow me to see the future." There was silence in the air. Phil Coulson's knife stabbing the beef stayed in midair, and time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Lu Yu was very satisfied with this effect, but Phil Coulson didn't seem to intend to give Lu Yu face all the time. "As far as I know, you are called Sandman." Phil Coulson, who had been silent for a long time, put the beef into his mouth and expressed his disbelief very tactfully. "You definitely got it wrong. Others call me Desert Tyrant." Lu Yu did not panic and said calmly, "Mutant can have more than one mutant ability. As a S.H.I.E.L.D level 7 or 8 agent." Lu Yu suddenly chuckled at Phil Coulson, who was slowly becoming serious. "You should have the authority to know that there are many mutants with multiple abilities, and I am just one of them. What kind of lie is the hardest for people to see through is a lie that is half true and half false. Mutants with multiple abilities do exist in the world." Lu Yu used this to cover up his lies and to give himself an excuse to display the power of the disc in the future. "I have more abilities because I have more genetic mutations. If you don't accept this reason, you can try mutation if you have the guts." After listening to Lu Yu's words, the smile on Phil Coulson's face slowly disappeared, replaced by a very cautious expression. "Agent grading is an important system formed by S.H.I.E.L.D. The identity of the agent is very confidential." Lu Yu was able to casually tell his agent grade, which had to arouse his great attention. "This only shows that you know something about us," Phil Coulson said in a tentative tone. "It cannot be used as evidence that you can predict the future. I got your identity information from the fragments of the future," Liu Yu said in a desperate manner. "You can choose not to believe me, but don't wait until S.H.I.E.L.D disappears from this world and then come back to complain that I didn't say hello to you in advance. Mr. Prince, you have to take responsibility for what you said. Are you sure you really saw this future?" Phil Coulson's brows knitted together, and he stared at Liu Yu, as if he wanted to start from Liu Yu. Traces of lying and guilty conscience were found on Yu's face. It would have happened in the future that S.H.I.E.L.D would be breached. Although it later underwent reconstruction, in a sense, my S.H.I.E.L.D has indeed disappeared. Liu Yu didn't talk nonsense, he just exaggerated the truth a little. Phil Coulson naturally couldn't find anything on his face. "Do you know why I am telling you this? Because in the future I see, you are on the side of S.H.I.E.L.D. You have spies inside, and there are enough spies to destroy you several times." A playful smile appeared on Liu Yu's face, who called S.H.I.E.L.D. In the early days of its establishment, S.H.I.E.L.D insisted on seeking death and recruited many members of Hydra. Woolen cloth. Liu Yu's words have revealed important information very directly, making Phil Coulson's eyes flicker, thinking about how credible it is. "I will tell you the list of spies I know, but they are all boss-level ones. I am too lazy to take the time to remember them." Seeing that Phil Coulson had taken the bait, Liu Yu's smile became more and more triumphant. "But your director must come and talk to me personally about all this. His name is Nick Fury, right? A one-eyed dragon," Liu Yu added at the right time. After listening to Liu Yu's words, Phil Coulson's serious expression suddenly relaxed. What Liu Yu said was far beyond the scope of what he could decide. The evaluation task he came here for today has been completed, so he planned to take this problem back to give his director a headache. "I will report what you said to our leader." Phil Coulson stood up and bowed to Liu Yu. "If what you said is true, I thank you on behalf of the entire country. You will become a symbol of the entire country hero." "No, I can't wear the superhero hat. I am willing to help you because I have my own plans." Liu Yu did not accept Phil Coulson's thanks. "Just kidding, he plans to kill 10 chunks of S.H.I.E.L.D." Walking out of the door of Liu Yu's house, Phil Coulson raised his head and looked at the bright sunshine, but his heart was heavy. If, as Liu Yu said, there are a large number of spies in S.H.I.E.L.D, then Phil Coulson cannot imagine what terrible things will happen. The sky is going to change. Phil Coulson sighed heavily, straightened his clothes, put his unique smile on his face, and walked towards the white SUV parked under the tree. "It seems that you are making good progress." Natasha Romanoff saw Phil Coulson getting into the car and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "You were not kicked out or eaten as lunch." "I'm lucky, he's a good-tempered person." Phil Coulson put on a face, smiled bitterly and started the car. "He didn't kick me out, but he told me some news that scared me." "What news can scare you?" Natasha Romanoff looked curiously at Phil Coulson, as Agent Phil Coulson did not answer Natasha Romanoff's, Zhao Niu's, question, but suddenly asked Natasha Romanoff, "What do you think of the name S.H.I.E.L.D? That sounds good. Is the boss finally willing to change his name?" When Natasha Romanoff saw Phil Coulson change the subject, she knew that the information Phil Coulson had obtained was an important secret that needed to be kept secret from her, so she stopped asking for trouble. "Although not yet, my wife will soon." Phil Coulson stepped on the accelerator and the white SUV drove onto the road. Fury's agent has left God's villa. On the roof of a tall building not far from the villa, a man in black with several scars on his face watched through binoculars as the white SUV gradually disappeared on the road. "Evacuate quickly and don't be discovered by the target. We must ensure that the Dawn God plan can proceed smoothly." The voice coming from the scarred man's headset was hoarse and sharp. "He will lead us Hydra and rule the entire world." Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Chapter 46. Phil Coulson had just seen off S.H.I.E.L.D. Before Liu Yu could return to the dining table and sit down, the landline phone in the villa rang. "It's strange, Wendy and the others probably don't know I'm here." Walking to the living room with doubts, Liu Yu picked up the phone, and immediately Tony's high-spirited voice came from the phone. Prince? You don't have to answer me, I'm just asking politely. Tony said with a somewhat proud voice, I know it's you, my satellite has already seen you. Liu Yu didn't worry about how Tony got his phone number. He knew that Tony, who had J.A.R.B.I.S, could find out all the information about a person in just a few seconds. Let me guess, have you developed the anti-prince armor? He said in a joking tone. If not, you have to think about how to appease my anger. Tony hesitated for a moment, then replied unwillingly, give me time, it's just a matter of time. I have never doubted this. You are one of the few smart people on Earth. Liu Yu raised his eyebrows non-committally on the other end of the phone. He knew how powerful Tony was in creating ability. In the comics of his previous life, Tony even built an anti-Galactus armor. Who is Galactus? Galactus' full name is Planet Devourer. He is the only person who survived the last universe era. It is one of the 5 great gods of the universe, and is on the same level as the main gods of eternity and death. Liu Yu didn't see whether the anti-Galactus armor defeated Galactus, but the fact that Tony was able to build it, even if he was only able to punch Galactus a few times, shows how strong Tony is in the aspect of individual armor. But even if Tony's creativity is so strong, Liu Yu is still not worried at all. Let's not talk about whether Tony can understand the death rules used by Liu Yu. Even if we just talk about creating an armor that can restrain his other abilities, it is impossible to do it in a short time. After all, Liu Yu still has quite a lot of abilities. After Tony builds an armor that can fully suppress his current abilities, Liu Yu may have awakened new divine power. That's right, after a few battles, the disc in Liu Yu's mind that had been silent for 8 years began to react again. A new bead seemed to be looming and seemed to light up. He could feel it on his chest. There is a fire eager to burst out. It seems that as long as there is an opportunity, they can be released and then sweep the world as kings. Liu Yu doesn't know whose ability is about to awakening, but he can guess that it must be a god related to fire. He felt that he should find some time to recall how many fire gods there were in the mists of his previous life, and maybe he could learn about them in advance before awakening. I have a press conference in the afternoon. Tony's voice was rare and serious. The board of directors will be reorganized later, and I need your support. What good do I do? Liu Yu thought about it in her mind. It was probably at this afternoon press conference that Tony was going to say his famous classic line. In one sentence that exudes the aura of Tony's second grade, I am Iron Man. I thought we shared the same clothes and had developed a deep friendship. Tony said in a very exaggerated tone, shouldn't good friends help each other? You have slept in the same bed with so many women, and I haven't seen you have any deep friendship with them. As soon as Liu Yu said the words, he felt that there was something strange in his words, and he quickly changed his words. I mean, what do the clothes I grabbed by my own ability have to do with you? I will give you 30% of Obadiah's shares. Tony said helplessly after a period of silence. This is the first time he has met such a shameless person like Liu Yu. Black can be said to be white. There is simply no way to connect the current Liu Yu with the cold look last night. I want 60%. Liu Yu said in a non-negotiable tone, by the way, I want someone from you? You have a really big appetite. Tony said with some dissatisfaction, I can only give you 40% at most. Don't refuse me in a hurry. What are my conditions? The feeling of palladium poisoning is not pleasant. Liu Yu planned to use things that originally belonged to Tony to get Zhao Heilin from Tony, and by the way, he could get free money. Take the 60% share left by Obadiah. Holding the phone receiver, Liu Yu's lips curled up slightly. He was really looking forward to Tony's reaction after knowing the truth. Do you have any way to treat palladium poisoning? Tony on the other end of the phone was a little anxious. After all, this was a major issue related to his health. If someone else had said this to Tony, Tony might not believe it, but after seeing Liu Yu's ability to suck all a person's life force away in an instant, Tony felt that Liu Yu might be able to help him. First of all, do you agree to my conditions? Liu Yu asked in an unhurried tone. He was always sure that Tony would not refuse this bargaining chip. As an inspirational pseudo-prophet, Liu Yu's biggest advantage is that he is familiar with the fate of every big shot. The former S.H.I.E.L.D. and the current Iron Man, each of them can only follow Liu Yu's rhythm. Deal. Tony agreed to Liu Yu's conditions very readily. Compared with his life, a small share is nothing. Except for Little Pepper, you can take anyone away. Okay, I'll contact you when I get to the company. After saying that, Lu Yu hung up the phone without waiting for Tony to answer. Tony was holding the phone blankly in his office, listening to the blind beeping sound on the phone. He couldn't help but smiled bitterly. Is this what tit for tat is? In this world, money, it's a good idea. There are people who hold grudges like this. Sir, based on analysis, I think you are the same type of people. The virtual image of J.A.R.V.I.S. appeared in the office. J.A.R.V.I.S. You can choose not to speak at this time. After changing into casual clothes, Lu Yu drove a Maserati Quattroporte from the garage. His favorite Porsche supercar was declared scrapped last night, and he could only use this car that had been parked here for who knows how long for transportation. On the way to the Stark Group building, Lu Yu's car stopped in front of a traffic light and waited for the light to turn green. Run, everyone. Run, there is a monster. Lu Yu, who was playing with sand in his palms, suddenly heard the fearful shouts of many people coming from outside the car window. Looking along the shouts, Lu Yu saw a huge amount of upright lizard man, pulling a street lamp out of the ground. Chapter 47, You humans, don't look at me with that disgusting look. The lizard man roared at passers-by, waving the street lamp. Do you want me to send you to hell? The people around the big lizard fled in panic. Some people even fell to the ground and didn't have time to get up. They rolled and crawled away towards the distance. I'm here, big lizard. A masked man wearing a red and blue tights swung toward the lizard man with a thin white silk thread between the buildings. I am your opponent. Why are you looking for me? Common man's troubles. It's you again, Spider-Man. The lizard man roared, raised the street lamp in his hand above his head and threw it at Spider-Man. The street light flew rapidly through the air, but Spider-Man easily dodged it. Boom. Huge amounts of sound came out, and the street lamp thrown by the lizard man landed on the roof of a black Maserati Quattroporte, and suddenly the entire roof of the car was dented to a large extent. Oh my god, do I have a grudge against you guys? Lu Yu got out of the car, put his hands in his hair, and looked at his luxury car in disbelief. Although he didn't feel bad about paying for the car, 2 cars were smashed in 2 days, which made him feel very speechless. Brother, now is not the time to care about your car. There is a big monster over there. Spider-Man used the cobweb to swing into the sky above Lu Yu. In order to prevent you from being accidentally injured by our battle, I will take you there first. In a safe place, come back and meet this guy again. After saying that, Spider-Man lowered his height and grabbed the arm with one hand. You're right, now really shouldn't be the time to look at cars. Lu Yu's hands were as fast as lightning, grabbing Spider-Man's stretched out hand one step ahead of Spider-Man, and said with anger in his voice, I should teach the culprit who caused this situation a lesson first. Lu Yu's terrifying body power exploded in an instant, pulling Spider-Man down from the air. Spider-Man's originally tough cobweb became extremely fragile at this time, and it made a crisp snapping sound directly under Lu Yu's terrifying force. Hey, you can't do this, I want to save you? You can't. Before Spider-Man could finish speaking, he was whipped around a few times by Lu Yu and then thrown towards the lizard man like a football. You look at me as if I need your help. Lu Yu shouted at Spider-Man, who flew out. Please save yourself first. Humans who only know how to fight in a nest. The lizard man sneered and reached out to catch Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, his move was not to save Spider-Man, but to brutally kill Spider-Man after picking him up. His hatred for Spider-Man has penetrated deep into his bones. The moment the lizard man's hands came into contact with Spider-Man's body, the lizard man's expression suddenly changed. He felt a huge amount of power transmitted to his body through Spider-Man, and the next moment he was knocked out by Spider-Man's body. Boom! Spider-Man and the lizardman collided with the trash can, breaking the trash can into pieces. A large amount of garbage covered their bodies, emitting a strong stench. God, what did I see? In the building above the trash can, the water glass in the hand of an intellectual beauty fell to the ground. She stared at what was happening outside the window in stunned silence. Spider-Man, the city hero of New York, was thrown out by an insignificant-looking young man, together with the big lizard man who was plundering everywhere in the city. Who is that young man? Is he a hero or a villain? This is not only a question that the intellectual beauty wants to ask, but also a question in the minds of many people around who are watching from a distance and watching the excitement. The lizard man's physical condition is a little better than that of Spider-Man. He first wakes up from the dazed state where his brain was hit. He staggered up and stared at Lou with his snake-like vertical pupils. "You damn human being! I'm going to kill you." The lizard man could no longer care about Spider-Man. He raised his sharp claws and rushed towards Liu Yu. Odd-egg, he vowed to kill this hateful man of humanity torn to pieces. "I've heard that lizards are very smart before." Facing the menacing lizard man, Liu Yu did not panic at all, but said sarcastically, "But you are just too stupid." Liu Yu clenched his fist, concentrated his strength on it, and aimed at the lizard man rushing toward him. Ka-ka-ka. The lizard man's claws collided with Liu Yu's fist, and the hard skin on his claws exploded together with the muscles in an instant. The bones kept breaking, and there was a series of crisp cracks of fractures. Under the pain, the look in the lizard man's eyes became even more vicious and crazy, and the tail on his back slapped Liu Yu with a fierce wind whistle. The gray light in Liu Yu's eyes lit up, and the black death energy in the invisible world enveloped Liu Yu's palm in an instant. Raising his hand surrounded by deathly aura, Liu Yu faced the lizard's tail waving towards him. When the lizard's tail was about to hit Liu Yu, he was firmly caught by Master Liu Yu. The power in his body erupted like a volcano. Pulling on the lizard man's tail, he lifted him directly over his head and slapped him towards the metal bench on the roadside. All this happened extremely quickly, just like a flash of lightning. Liu Yu's hand grasped the lizard man's tail. The death energy was constantly corrupting the lizard man's tail. Pieces of body tissue that were as dry as soil fell from the lizard man's tail. "What the hell are you doing?" The lizard man's voice was filled with anger and panic. He felt that his body was losing contact with him starting from the tail. He wanted to attack violently, but Liu Yu stepped on his head to the ground. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't move Liu Yu's feet. "If you want to live, don't move." Liu Yu's cold voice made the lizard man shiver all over, and he gave up resistance by accident. "You are really cool and powerful, but you are also quite unreasonable." At this time, Spider-Man got up with difficulty and smiled bitterly at Liu Yu. He now felt that all his internal organs were in severe pain, and his whole body seemed to be falling apart and he couldn't lift any strength. In just one round of confrontation, he completely lost his ability to fight. Although there was a reason why he was unprepared, his speed was so fast that even his spider senses and super speed could not react. Coupled with the power of a humanoid beast, the man in casual clothes in front of him was so powerful. Definitely the strongest person he has ever seen, bar none. Let us forgive the fact that the current Spider-Man is still a little Spider-Man who has never seen any big market. On the contrary, I don't think there are many people who are more reasonable than me. Liu Yu spread his hands helplessly as if he had been wronged and said, "For things like compensating me for my losses, I will let you the two are equally divided, and I will never favor any one of you." Chapter 48. Brother, are you kidding? Your car really has nothing to do with me. Spider-Man took a few steps back and quickly denied it. As a young boy, he still knows a little about luxury car brands. The maintenance cost of a Maserati Quattroporte is simply not worth hundreds of thousands. Not to mention asking him to pay half of it. Even if he was asked to pay only the price of a rearview mirror, he might not be able to compensate even if he sells the iron. I have to say that for superheroes to get to the point where he is so poor is simply a disgrace to the superheroes. My teacher when I was in school taught me that students must be brave enough to admit their mistakes. Liu Yu directly and meaningfully called Spider-Man's name, Peter Parker. Spider-Man was called out by Liu Yu, and his heart sank suddenly. He glanced at the passers-by in a panic. "Who are you listening to? Me? I don't want to be called Peter by such an unsavory name. I think people from S.H.I.E.L.D have already contacted you." Liu Yu did not point out Spider-Man's poor acting skills, with a mysterious smile on his face. If Phil Coulson were here, he would definitely find that Liu Yu's smile was exactly the same as when Liu Yu told him that he could see the future. Yes, this is the expression Liu Yu will show when he is trying to deceive others. S.H.I.E.L.D. Spider-Man breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Liu Yu didn't mention his name again. "I've never heard of this name. Does it sound like a national organization?" "Oh, I forgot. S.H.I.E.L.D is still called the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Bureau. Lu Yu put a little more strength on his legs and pushed the lizard man back to the ground as he tried to take advantage of the opportunity to raise his head. I remember this name. It looks like a smelly foot wrap. Spider-Man nodded in realization. They asked me to join them to defend our country. There is nothing more official than this. Reason. It seems you don't agree. Lu Yu was slightly surprised. In his memory, Spider-Man joined S.H.I.E.L.D and also participated in the Civil War in Captain America 3. I told them I had to think about it for a while. Spider-Man asked with some confusion, have they also come to see you, or are you one of theirs? Spider-Man's words made Lu Yu understand. At this time, Spider-Man had not yet reached a high level of consciousness, and his heart was still in a state of uncertainty. This situation is really the best for Lu Yu, and it gives him a little more confidence in what he is going to do next. You seem to be deliberately making me laugh. The expression on Lu Yu's face was wonderful, as if he had heard something very funny. They can't even pay Tony Stark's salary. How can they hire me? They work. Tony Stark? Is this the Tony Stark I know? Lu Yu couldn't see Spider-Man's expression, but he could hear Spider-Man's surprise from Spider-Man's tone. This made him very satisfied. This was the effect he wanted. If you know the one from Stark Industries, I think there is nothing wrong with it. God, this must be big news. Tony Stark actually has super abilities. Spider-Man knew very little about S.H.I.E.L.D. In his opinion, S.H.I.E.L.D should be a group of super people, so he was very shocked that Tony Stark actually was invited by S.H.I.E.L.D. Little Spider-Man, your focus is wrong, Lu Yu said with some dissatisfaction. What I want to express to you is that although S.H.I.E.L.D is a national organization, compared with people of my level, it is an out-and-out poor guy. Spider-Man froze on the spot and said in confusion, brother, the fact that Tony Stark has superpowers may make me a lot of money, but you have money but it has nothing to do with me. You won't give me your money. You think so? I don't think so. Lu Yu said with a confident smile, I plan to let you work for me for life. Don't you want to take your girlfriend on a date to a high-end restaurant, buy her nice clothes, and make her feel proud of you? Believe me, you don't have to be a hero in New York to keep your girlfriend. There was a sense of demagoguery in Lu Yu's words. You need money, something that can satisfy a woman's vanity. It's just dollars, I'll give it to you. You want to take me as your subordinate. Although Spider-Man was a little moved, he still said in a hesitative tone, this is definitely not a good idea. Zero, please give me flowers. Parker, your aunt has worked hard for you all her life, and she deserves to live a good life in her later years. I can work hard myself, I'm still young. Spider-Man didn't care what Lu Yu called him. He raised his head and slowly became determined. I can rely on my own ability to make the people around me live a good life. Then maybe you should take a look at this. Lu Yu's eyes suddenly overflowed with black deathly energy, wrapping Spider-Man, who was unaware of it, in it. Spider-Man felt that the environment around him suddenly began to blur, and the next moment he was floating in a gray sky. Under his feet, there was a black river with no end in sight. It was densely packed with people with painful expressions. They struggled to climb to the shore, but every time they were about to succeed, they were swept back into the river by black waves. These people were crying and howling miserably, and their voices enveloped the entire space. Look over there. Spider-Man was startled by Lu Yu's sudden voice. Lu Yu appeared beside Spider-Man out of thin air, pointing in a direction in the Black River. I think you should know that person. Spider-Man glanced at Lu Yu with a complicated expression and looked in the direction of Lu Yu's finger. His eyes suddenly widened and he shouted at the top of his lungs, Uncle Ben! The surrounding environment became blurry again. Before Spider-Man could rush down the Black River, he was pulled back to reality. In front of him was still Lu, who was stepping on the lizard man and facing him with a weird smile. You! What place was that just now? Hell! Spider-Man closed his eyes, recalling that he had just seen Uncle Ben in agony, and said in a heavy tone, the Wangchuan River in the underworld is where the deceased need to atone for their sins. Lu Yu said casually and made it up. He couldn't bring living people into the underworld, so he created an illusion to confuse Spider-Man. Now it seems that this illusion is for little Spider-Man whose mind is not yet fully mature. The effect is second to none. Chapter 49, Uncle Ben is a good man. Spider-Man no longer bothered to hide his identity. He shouted hysterically at Lu Yu, "He doesn't deserve to be treated like that. You must be lying to me. It's fake, isn't it?" At this time, Spider-Man was already in a bit of a mess because the matter involved his dead family. "Parker, not everyone can go to heaven or hell," Lu Yu said with a very helpless expression. "I'm sorry that I didn't lie to you. Your Uncle Ben is really suffering in the underworld." In fact, what Spider-Man said was not wrong. The scene he saw was just a false illusion created by Lu Yu. But Lu Yu will not admit this stupidly. He plans to use Benjamin as his lifeguard to take Spider-Man for his own use. When talking to Spider-Man, Lu Bulletin didn't keep an eye on him. He only told Spider-Man that Benjamin was really in the underworld, and did not admit that the scene in the underworld that Spider-Man saw was real. This way, even if Spider-Man discovers this later, he can't blame Lu Yu for lying to him. Although Lu Yu has made up his mind to take Spider-Man as his subordinate, Lu Yu prides himself on being a very reasonable person even when facing his own subordinates. Well, that's right, it's the truth. Defined by Lu Yu himself. The underworld really exists in the world. How could you take me in and then send me out again? Who do you think you are? Spider-Man reacted in his mind, as if he had grasped the last straw, and spoke in a very strange tone. He said hurriedly, "It must be sleep. You can easily do it with some hallucinogens." One Spider-Man looked at Lu Yu eagerly. He very much hoped that Lu Yu would nod and admit it at the next moment, so that he would not have to accept the cruel truth that his Uncle Ben was being tortured. However, Lu Yu is destined to disappoint Spider-Man. Facing Spider-Man's aggressive suspicion, Lu Yu didn't even have a trace of panic in his eyes and remained calm and composed. He chuckled lightly at Spider-Man and didn't rush to explain anything. Instead, he slowly lowered his head and looked at the lizard man lying down at his feet. "Do you want me to be your subordinate?" the lizard man at Lu Yu's feet asked in a hoarse voice. Having experienced the horror of having his body and soul corroded by invisible terrifying forces, the lizardman didn't want to experience it again, so he quickly said, "As long as you hand over to me the Spider-Man who doesn't listen to you, I will do whatever you ask me to do. You also put forward conditions." Lu Yu leaned over with a mocking expression. "You seem to have overestimated yourself. You want to be my subordinate, but you don't have the qualifications." Lu Yu removed his feet from the lizard man's head. Before the lizard man could get up to resist, Lu Yu grabbed the lizard with his lifeless hands. "Human head. Not only are you ugly, you also don't have much ability." Lu Yu's 5 fingers penetrated the lizard man's skull, penetrated deeply into the lizard man's skull, and pushed his head back again. On the ground? The lizard man's face began to become extremely distorted, and he howled in pain. His heavy body struggled on the ground, but no matter how he rolled, he could not escape Lu Yu's control. Because of the pain, the lizard man's fist kept hammering the ground, causing dust to fly in the air for a moment, and countless small cracks were created by him on the originally flat road. The tenacious vitality from the lizard gene prevented the lizard man from passing out and could only endure the severe pain soberly. "Parker, you ask me why I take you into and out of the underworld." While doing extremely cruel things, Lu Yu raised his head and smiled at Spider-Man. "Now I want to tell you the truth." A large amount of Black Death energy was generated from Lu Yu's body, and entered the lizard man's head along the fingers that Lu Yu forked into the lizard man's head. No. The skin on the lizard man's face constantly began to dry out, revealing the rapidly shrinking muscles inside. The blood in his entire head seemed to have evaporated, and no trace of blood could be seen flowing out of the open wounds. When the lizard man's entire head became completely inactive, this change began to spread rapidly to his whole body. Neck, body, arms, thighs. In just a few seconds, the lizard man who had a huge and strong body before turned into a thin lizard mummy. "Just because the entire underworld is my territory." Lu Yu took his hand out of the lizard man's head, took out tissue paper from his trouser pocket with the other hand, and kept wiping the broken muscles on his hand. "I can play with the rules of life and death as I wish." As if to confirm what Lu Yu said, the lizard man, who had turned into a mummy with only a layer of skin covering his skeleton and could not possibly survive, stood up from the ground tremblingly. The lizard man raised his hands and saw that his arms were only bones. His trembling voice was filled with extreme horror. "What did you do to me?" It allows you to temporarily stay in the human world as a dead person. Lu Yu smiled and patted the lizard man on the shoulder. Cherish it. You still have more than half an hour, so you don't need to thank me. The fragile bones of the lizard man's arm couldn't withstand the strength of Lu Yu's hand. Under Lu Yu's flapping, it broke and fell to the ground. You are a devil. The lizard man has lost the ability to recover. His arms can no longer regenerate themselves, and his eyes are flashing with fear. He wanted to escape, but now it was very difficult for him to even support his body and stand. The lizard man could feel that every movement he made was accelerating the consumption of the energy Lu Yu had left in his body. And when the energy is completely exhausted, that is when his life comes to an end? No, please let me go. I will listen to you in everything, please. Lu Yu ignored the lizard man's cry. Small characters like the lizard man would only be cannon fodder in any future war and would not play any role. In fact, he wants to conquer Spider-Man not only because of Spider-Man's future strength of 1.5, but also because of Spider-Man's extraordinary ability in biology. This is conducive to the establishment of his cutting-edge laboratory. Although the lizard man is also a very outstanding doctor, his development potential is still controllable. Neither can be compared to Spider-Man. Lu Yu walked over to Spider-Man, who had been standing there, as if he was frightened. Although he couldn't see the expression behind Spider-Man's mask, he could still tell Spider-Man's nervousness and fear from Spider-Man's slightly retreating body and the sound of swallowing saliva. After everyone dies, their souls belong to me. Lu Yu leaned close to Spider-Man's ear and whispered in a very soft voice, "Have you guessed my identity? If you do something for me, I will not only give you endless money, but I will also bring your uncle back from the underworld to the human world. And I guarantee that he will look 100 times better than that lizard over there." Chapter 50. As Lu Yu himself said, the advantage of a time traveler is not limited to being able to predict the future. Being familiar with the weaknesses and destiny of each superhero allows him to do anything unfavorable and become the one with the initiative. Just like now, although Spider-Man's heart keeps telling him that rejecting Lu Yu is the right choice, his mind always flashes back to his uncle Benjamin, who died in extreme pain in that Black River. Appearance. The words to refuse came to my lips, but I couldn't say anything. Spider-Man feels that Lu Yu is like a devil who escaped from hell, has insight into the hearts of mortals, whispers in his ear, and encourages him to use his soul to make a deal with him. "If I agree to do something for you." Spider-Man's voice was very stiff, and it was very difficult to spit out every word. "How can you guarantee that you have the ability to do what you say?" "I always speak with facts." Lu Yu put his hands on Spider-Man's shoulders, his eyes fixed on Spider-Man's eye patch. Gray light lit up in Lu Yu's eyes, filling the entire eye sockets with gray as time went by. Divinity revived at this moment, and Lu 03U's whole body exuded a heart-stopping sense of oppression. In Lu Yu's gray eyes, Spider-Man vaguely saw a dead black land, and he seemed to hear countless voices wailing in his ears. Despair, coldness, death, withering. Looking directly at Lu Yu, Spider-Man had a vague feeling. Just standing in front of Lu Yu like this, everything about him will no longer belong to him. Even breathing becomes something that requires permission. Regardless of strength, this is majesty that transcends the level of life, and is the divine power that only gods can possess. It is supreme and majestic and must not be blasphemed. How long can you bring Uncle Ben back? Strong hope arose in Spider-Man's heart. Facing the power displayed by Lu Yu, he completely believed what Lu Yu said. From Lu Yu, he felt the power that a mortal could not possess, as well as the supreme power of life and death. If Lu Yu can really resurrect his uncle, then why not sell his future to Lu Yu? For Benjamin's death, Spider-Man has always been filled with self-blame and wants to have the opportunity to make up for his mistakes. This is Spider-Man's weakness. After possessing the Godhead, Lu has obtained the qualification to freely enter and exit the underworld. Although due to rules, he cannot bring living people into the underworld, he can easily bring dead man back to the world and let the dead walk on the earth again. Lu Yu can indeed do what he promised Spider-Man. He only needs to take Benjamin's relics from his lifetime and find Benjamin's soul wandering in the underworld within a few days. But Lu Yu can't spare so much free time recently. He has too many things on his hands. It's Deadpool who was sent out to capture Mystique, and it's S.H.I.E.L.D. director who is about to negotiate a big deal with him. Lu Yu couldn't determine when these two people would come to his door, so he had to ensure that he had to wait in the human world during this period. Use mystique to plan for the future, that's the most important thing. The reunion scene between Spider-Man and his Uncle Benjamin can only be arranged after the official business is settled. Within a month, Lu Yu said after thinking for a while. What he wants to do at this time should be on track. Anyway, Benjamin also spent a lot of time in the underworld, not less than this time and a half. Why did it take so long? Spider-Man couldn't accept it. He said to Lu Yu angrily, "How could you let Uncle Ben stay in that damn place for 10 more sisters?" Parker, pay attention to the tone of your words. Lu Yu snorted coldly, "Since you have agreed to work for me, please learn not to question your boss's decision. Otherwise, it won't do you any good." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything else." Spider-Man calmed down a little. He realized how stupid it was for him to lose his temper with Lu Yu, so he quickly explained, "I just hope Uncle Ben can come back sooner. Get rid of the pain. It won't happen again." Lu Yu said with a warning in his tone, "Parker, not everyone in this world should revolve around you. I really miss him." Spider-Man is still a little unwilling, and there is no room for negotiation at all. "I need time to prepare. If you perform well, this time may be shortened." Lu Yu raised his eyebrows and took out a gold-plated bank card from his wallet and handed it to Spider-Man. "The password is 63, this is your first month's salary." "What kind of organization are we?" Spider-Man has begun to assume the role, placing himself in the position of Lu Yu's subordinates. "I haven't thought of a name yet." Lu Yu touched his chin and thought for a while. "It will probably be the Redemption Army, the Illuminati, or something like that. An organization that doesn't even have a name is so lax." Spider-Man said with a suspicious look, "Isn't your organization just the two of us? How is it possible? There are obviously 3 of us including you." Lu Yu walked towards his Maserati president and said to Spider-Man with a smile, "There is another person wearing the same uniform as you. I hope you will come. We can talk when we meet." To be honest, Lu Yu is still very much looking forward to the meeting between Deadpool and Spider-Man, 2 of Marvel's famous talkers. Lu Yu took off the street lamp from the roof of his car and threw it to the ground. "Are you just going to leave like this?" Spider-Man shouted to Lu Yu, "I don't even know where I'm going to find you, and what kind of work I need to do. Go back and enjoy your life for a few days. You just need to wait for me to come to you." Lu Yu opened the car door and got in, rolled down the window and showed a meaningful smile to Spider-Man. "I believe this you will definitely be able to do the job." Spider-Man was a little surprised. "You have so much confidence in me. That is definitely necessary." Lu Yu started the car, but the damage to the roof did not affect the driving. "What you want to do is actually of the same nature as the job you are doing now. They are all going to be heroes who save the world." Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.